All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Advisory Council meeting on August 28th of 2025. And so hopefully this one will be kind of a short and brief meeting. I'm sure we're all very busy. We have many irons in the fire, as it were. And I think one of the kind of overall commentaries I will have is we have a lot of projects and things that are kind of like in the middle of being worked on. So there's not a whole lot to report out and not a lot of questions. But we do have a couple of announcements and some and a little bit of voting to do in terms of the agenda as far as the agenda is concerned. So we'll do introductions as a way of taking attendance. So in order as you see it here, please kind of introduce yourself and who you represent in order. So I will start first. I'm Alfredo Herrera. I'm the Geographic Information Officer with OPM. Scott, I believe you are up next.
Sorry, I had the screen off. Scott Calls, Chief Data Officer, OPM. Present. Thank you, Alfredo.
Worries.
Stuart Deland, CTD.
Elizabeth Congo, DOT.
Dan indicated that he was going to be late. We'll make sure to flag it when he arrives. So Gary, you can go ahead.
Yep, Gary Archambault, DPH.
Eric Snowden, Connecticut COGS.
Mark Hoover, MetroCog.
John Guskowski with Tyche Planning on behalf of CCM.
Tracy DeGarcia indicated that she was going to be absent this time, so we can go ahead.
Okay, Emily Wilson, Yukon.
Pete Samperi, United Illuminating.
Meg McGaffin, General Assembly, General at Large.
Yep. Thank you. And we still have a vacant seat, so I think that is everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So as you saw from the agenda, I'll back it up a little bit. We're going to be going through a couple of things. The first thing right out of the gate is kind of discussion. And actually, before we even get that, we do have an announcement. Carl Zimmerman has resigned the GIS office back in July. He went to go work, take an important position in New York City. So that position is now currently vacant, and the recruitment is now open and closes on September 10th. So please share with anyone that you think may be interested. Does anybody have any questions on that particular topic before we move on to the discussion around the strategic plan?
No, I'd like to note that's too bad. Carl was awesome. Really moved the office forward and was great to work with and took on tremendous projects. I would actually, if we could we move to send him on behalf of the advisory council a thank you letter?
I think that's a great idea. I'll second that motion.
All right. We will coordinate with the GIS office, and I don't know, is anyone interested in writing said letter?
Well, it's my motion. I'd be happy to take a whack at it, but there's probably 10,000 things he was doing in the office that I have no idea who was doing. But so Alfredo, I'd be happy to work with you on it.
Yeah, please. We can connect later this week or early next week and kind of have a chat, kind of figure out what we want to say, and then we can kind of share it amongst the group.
Great.
And get that sent over to him.
Okay. Thanks.
I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah, he is. We already feel his absence, but I'm sure we will hopefully be able to kind of move forward and do great things despite of this setback. All right, so kind of related to Carl, one of the last things that he worked on before his departure was to update do the first update of the strategic plan. We sent this back to everyone back in, I believe, June. Miss Tracy. So we kind of skipped voting on it back then. We have sent it to her. She has given us her feedback, and she's okay with voting this in her absence. So I just wanted to kind of open the floor to the council to see if you guys had any further thoughts or questions or concerns with the annual update of the strategic plan. Hearing nothing, I would entertain a motion to vote.
So I move, this is John Guskowski, move to approve the update to the strategic plan.
I'll second that.
No, this is Mark. I'll second that.
Oh, I think Liz beat me to it. All right. So all of those in favor of approving the update of the strategic plan, say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. We have adopted the annual update of the strategic plan. Thank you for that. We will note that in the meeting notes and all of that kind of good stuff. We will then proceed to publish it on the GIS office website and all of the relevant places that that document needs to be. Going forward, it is my intention to make kind of tweaks and more minor updates to the annual update until we do the big refresh. I believe that will be in 2027, 28, somewhere in there. So after the 5 years, we will take a full refresh. We'll do a full, kind of effort to rewrite the plan. We will use the previous plan as the kind of guiding star starting point. We plan to do the full outreach, very similarly to the way Carl did it before, where we talk to all the various stakeholders, interview the key stakeholders, and kind of have an open survey to everyone. And in the intervening time, we will do kind of smaller, more maintenance-centric updates to make sure that it stays relevant with both the state's and the community's priorities. So with that, we kind of discussed that. So now we'd like to get into the priority topics discussion, and I believe Ashley and Leah are up first to talk about the parsing and camel updates. So, you have the floor.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Just to give a quick update to the 2025 parcel and camel collection, we are finished with the initial processing. Both the camel layer and the parcel layers are joined in the QA/QC process. Just to state some final numbers from the submissions, 168 towns submitted CAMA, with 140 of those towns complying with the suppression field from 2024's collection that we added, and 24 of those towns were out of compliance. And for the parcels, 158 towns submitted data this year, and 117 of those towns were in our parcel standard.
All right, next it's me. So this is an update of the 2024-2026 parcel and CAMA grants. They're underway. These are grants that we released to the world in December last year, and so now would be the eighth month on this progress. We do bi-weekly meetings with the Council of Governments to get updates with them. And so these are a few of the highlights of the updates that I've heard from the Councils of Governments and their work with the municipalities. So the Councils of Governments are at different stages of engagement with the contracts. Some have initiated these contracts and completed work with municipalities. Some of them are still in progress of getting the contract signed. A lot of these contracts are looking more as a task-based orders. That means vendors are sort of like going into the data sets and looking at the problems based on sort of the initial analysis that the GIS office provided, and then they talk and consult with the councils of government and the municipalities and say this is the task that we are looking into doing based on the GIS office and the grants priorities, and then it gets approved. So this is something that came up from one of the councils of from CCOG as a recommendation. So we're very thankful that this is a way that they can attend this contracts, but it gives us a little bit more space to analyze the data and go like problem by problem based on those priorities. So far, we only have spent 2% of the total 2 million grants. So we still have one more year, a couple of months out of this year, and then one more year to attend these priorities and this task within the grants. So I'm not too concerned about the spending. I think some of them are going to go fast as well, based on like as the tasks get a little bit more what do you say, difficult. So, and then the work is being carried out through a mix of in-house efforts through the COGS and also with vendor partnerships. So there's a little bit of everything for each council of government. I understand that significant work has gone into the first sort of task of match rate, and most of that is basically digitizing condominiums using the 2023 building footprints. And I've been carrying discussions with COGS, with vendors, with municipalities about those key CAMA and parcel fields. For us, a parcel ID discussion, we're just getting it started, and we're going to have some sort of pilot with one of the vendors, and then we're also talking a lot about the state use code field. That field is used as it's based on an abstract coding system that OPM established to classify and then report to us residential, commercial, industrial, and vacant lands. And as we have observed in this field and analysis I've done, there's 5,000 unique combinations of the code and the description, and so that is really not useful. The code is limited to 6 sort of big categories, and if I remember correctly, and right now the codes are used differently across the state because the assessors usually have used it for their own personal analysis. So it's really right now when we see it in the statewide layer, it's not very useful for larger analytical or research that has been requested to us by different federal agencies like USGS or Green Bank. So we're trying to stabilize that field, so give it a little bit more usefulness to it. But work is on their way, and everybody is sort of like understanding the whole concepts within the priorities and in the fields as well. So I'm really glad to understand that this work is being attended, and people are working on it in great spirits from the vendor side, from the COGS, from the municipalities. Has been well received. I think I have the next one too. So next. All right, so on the other topics that I've been working on is to stay wide addressing updates, things. So I think last time I mentioned something about the Yukon master program working on their address, on developing a methodology to conflate and analyze address from different data sources that we receive, and including the parcel and CAMA data and other private industry and whatnot. So with that, that's sort of like the initial steps. We're looking at this data comprehensively and looking at the sort of the state of like the quality of the addresses. In that topic, we also internally have been supporting different agencies in geocoding their data, and in that we've looked many programs, and we understand that some of often they lack consistency. So we're having a little issues on geocoding, then complete addresses, and sometimes the mailing addresses are mixed in the same field, so that's renders some of this data not very useful. So what we're trying to work now is in developing a guidance on location specifically address for state administrative data. And in that, we want to sort of, in that guidance that we're going to release to state agencies, we want like to define, those differences between what is a location versus a mailing address, defining a schema for a complete location address, and also recommendations for implementation. And if we go to the next slide, this is like the high level this is like just like the first stab at this conceptual guidance. So obviously, one of the things that I want to, recommend, or we would like to recommend as an office, is to have separate fields for location and mailing address. Then we also want to recommend like a minimum location address standard, or basically that minimum location information or address that would be useful for using within a geocoder. And then obviously the existing data and the data that is going to come forward has to go through a different steps of implementation, whether it be reviewing the existing data sets for incomplete or incorrect data, and then also will keep suggesting the agencies to coordinate with us to support with the validation, the address validation and the geocoding, and the address validation based on that master address data set that we're trying to work towards to. And then the recommendations when collecting address data, like for example, using drop downs to narrow the address search. For example, start with the cog or start with the town, and then the town is limited to the result within that town. Then we have a little bit more of consistency across the addresses. So in blue here, you see the minimum location address standard is your usual. You would be surprised that a lot of people miss a lot of those details, especially in street address, the pre and the suffix aspects of the number and the street name. But we would like to recommend that the completeness of street addresses. Obviously, in the guidance there are going to be examples of the pre and post. The pre and the suffix, and then the municipality, we would like to have it standardized to the 169 towns whenever possible. Although geocoders seem to function also with village names and all that, and then the state and the zip code or zip code +4. With this part of the sort of that first set of concepts for the guidance, I open it to the GIS, to the council, to give me recommendations or comments about this part of the statewide or the agency-wide guidance on addresses for administrative data.
So for a little context, I think I'm going to call on Scott to kind of share a little bit of insight as to kind of like, why this might be important and specifically for kind of like this stuff from the agency perspective. And others that you may want to say.
Excellent. And I have a question for the council members too. Maybe so, like Ashley had said in the previous slide, this is really an area where there's GIS expertise and experience, but it can cover things more broadly for state administrative data. We have lots of things where the state collects data, collects some kind of address information, and if it's incomplete or inaccurate, it's very tough to make that into spatial data that then GIS community kind of work with. We have, as we speak, probably 20 feet away from both Ashley and I, our intern from UConn, who's wonderful, just got started going through thousands of records in a data set that shall not be named to go through and like clean up the address data where things are missing or it's imprecise or it just says like it's on Route 6. And so those are the kind of things that hinders the actual ability to use that data for different purposes, working with a data set that could be used for a bunch of different sort of environmental efforts the state's taking, but because the address information is bad, it can't be spatialized. And so that's a challenge. But when you present this to agencies, then they sort of say, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know like the right way to put in an address other than that. So having standards, they're voluntary, but having standards that we can use, promulgate across agencies and could be used more broadly, I think is a good opportunity to improve data quality, enable us to sort of make better use of data and to create consistency that hopefully for GIS community is welcome. But this one I think is relatively hopefully low-hanging fruit, and there's a lot of address information across a lot of different data sets, and getting consistency I think would be beneficial. A question I had for other members on the council is if anyone has an address standard that you use within your agency or employer that is one that works well, and if you have that and you want to either share anything that would be relevant for the development here, or send it offline to the GIS office. But that's also where I don't think no one wants to reinvent the wheel. So I don't know if there's folks in the advisory council that have address standards that they're fond of or use, or that they think have worked well, or just ways of disseminating that once it's done to get the word out.
Hey, Scott, it's Dan Chaya. Yeah, we use for 911. Well, there's two different things. There's the telephone records, and then there's our GIS data. For the telephone records, it is. I don't exactly know what the standard is, but we do lock it down pretty hard so that you can't just add a record in and say it's this street. You have to like match it to a street, and then when you don't match it to a street, I get notified, and then I have to check to make sure that it works. And it might be, nope, it's not Avenue, it's road. Please use, Church Road instead of Church Avenue. So that helps because I've found with anything, and you're probably noticing this with whatever that database is that you're using, is that when you freehand an address database, it can turn into complete chaos, and just stuff is just typed in any old way. So it's nice to have something like that. For our GIS data, we use the NINA standard, but it's not a standard for like what I guess it is in a way. It's more of like a database standard. So this is how you set up your database, but we do lock it down for like street types and stuff like that, like street, avenue. Certain fields can only go into certain fields in our street parsed out street names can only go into it. So in the pre-direction field, only north, south, east, west, northwest, southwest, southeast, southwest can go in there, and same for like the post direction. And then like the street name field is wide open, but I'm the only one who puts anything in there, so I make sure that it matches. But that's all we do. So it's basically Nina, and then I guess the phone one, like the phone side, is more. It's an old Nina standard, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appreciate that insight. And as we kind of go through kind of creating a standard, we will definitely share it with the council. I know Meg had a question at one point. She lowered her hand again. I don't know if she still has her question.
Yeah, no, I was gonna kind of, just hope that Dan was gonna speak first, so that was great. And I would, addresses are hard and tricky, and people, have difficulties understanding them. I think it's certainly going to be one of those things where outreach to the agencies, first of all, in understanding why it's important and how it helps them, and then two, anywhere where you can provide a lookup table. So when people are, typing in addresses, the lowest amount of effort required on their part is always helpful. But yeah, having, I mean, Dan's got a great thing going. I would always, defer to his advice.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or concerns with our efforts on this topic?
One other thing too that you might want to be able to think about is if you go to some of the vendors that the state agencies are dealing with, you know, uh, I'm thinking of like public school records, public health records, DCF, the courts, those places they're taking in addresses all the live long day, and putting them into systems. If you did something similar to the effort you put forth with the camera vendors and talk to those vendors and say, hey, let us help you, do something with data entry so that data output is cleaner, that could be, maybe a viable way to keep, approach some sort of level of continuity in addresses. Because the schools, I mean, all the schools are reporting to the DECD, all their numbers and data, and they're all using, Power Schools or whatever that their systems are. They're capturing so much address data that could be valuable and useful if it was formatted cleanly.
Hey, Alfredo,
Yes.
this is Dan. Well, one last thing is the other way to consider this is either you go strong with like locking everything down, or you don't. Either way, there's going to be work, but it's a matter of, with like locking things down, what you do is you educate all the towns. This is how we want this data. Please do it the following manner, and like have us. If there is a brand new road and it's not in our list yet, there's a mechanism to like put it in there. But locking it down, you teach them how to use it and make it simple, and then all your data is nice. The other option is you just let them do anything they want, and then we spend all our time fixing addresses and calling up towns asking what do they mean by this. So either one's going to be work. It's just a matter of what would you rather do. Would you rather teach them and have it right, or go back? Because I know when I get the parcel data from the towns, there's a lot of times that I'm making calls back to them to go, this doesn't make just bad addressing in some of the location fields, and I have to fix it. And if if everything was standardized and I knew, yep, this is it, I could just take that data and import it into 911. But I sometimes have to fix things. A lot of times it's with they have a unit number added and they throw it in the street name field and it doesn't make sense, or it messes something up, or directional names that shouldn't be there. So I personally think the first way to educate and just standardize is the best way, and we could figure something out to make it work for people that are having issues. But that's just my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think that does seem to be kind of like the 2 obvious paths. I think ultimately it will likely be a combination of the 2, hopefully more of the former rather than the latter, but we will strike that balance when we come upon it. Yeah. Anyone else have any comments on this?
I just have a general question: is how will this data set work with Dan's data set? I mean, if you guys are both updating things or that, I mean, just wondering how that process works.
Yeah, so this guidance is really for administrative data. So it would be you have a list of people, students, and you have to capture where they live in some format. So this guidance is really meant to give a best practice of how that should be entered. So part of it is, as kind of Dan spoke, it needs to be an education component to it, and saying this is how it should be. This is the best practice, and we can think about ways of implementing it better. But I think in terms of how it interacts with Dan's data set, that is going to be kind of a secondary parallel path where we are working on what we're calling the master address data set that Dan's data will be part of. So these are kind of slightly different but parallel concepts. Scott?
And in that,
Oh, sure.
sorry to interject, but the 911 data set, even with the work that the Yukon students, master students did, we directed them to look at the E911 data as a North Star as well, in the process of validating and completing these addresses with other data sets.
Scott?
What Ashley said, I think you were talking about two things kind of at the same time. One is the actual data set that is worked on with the UConn students, and then a set of standards to encourage better, more consistent collection of address data. And there's an interaction with the data that Dan is referencing and manages. I think the way I think of it is like the wording that Alfredo is using is best practices, guidance in a few places. So we're looking for something that is very broad, that can be used in a lot of different settings. Someone mentioned schools a few minutes ago. So like if there's 1,500 schools in the state of Connecticut that all collect address data in possibly different ways. So you want something that can be used very broadly across the board. So it is going to have to be in that framework of sort of best practices and guidance. And when you hear Dan talking, using words like, sort of strict, locked down. And so like that's a standard that is like very precise because it's used for a specific purpose. And we can't hold everybody to that sort of same standard. We're going to have something I would anticipate that is like a minimum, right? Like it says on the slide, minimum location address standard that helps get better quality data for addresses over a pretty broad base. And when there's a specific need to have it like more detailed, then that standard has to be consistent with the more detailed version. You can't have a minimum standard that is inconsistent with like a more rigid standard. So it's taking acknowledgement of like what some of those specific cases are, which is where it is again like helpful if members of the council can say we have to use this standard for this purpose, or this is one that works well for us. But I think that's the way I think of it, as sort of like levels of strictness or rigidity, and this is like minimum, very broad based to try and improve quality across a broad range of use cases. Which again, I think it's coming up just because we see address data come in through a lot of different channels. Lots of people collect addresses for different purposes, and it's done in many, many different ways, and it just creates challenges to create spatial data out of that.
Great, thanks.
Great discussion on this topic. If no one has any objectives, I think we can move on to a quick update on the imagery and elevation stuff. All right. Thank you, Ashley. The imagery program and the elevation stuff, where we are currently is we have received all of the imagery and elevation data. A lot of it has been published, in no small part thanks to Emily. And some of the other, vector and ancillary deliverables are in various states of being published. Some are already there, some are not yet done. We have received the data from Ecopia for the impervious cover work. I'll show some samples of that. They are doing some reprocessing because some slight discrepancies around the border of the state. Their algorithm tends to lose efficiency and precision around the edges of the imagery. But we made sure we had to kind of go back and make sure that they covered the actual everything within the actual boundary of the state. So they are doing some minor reprocessing to kind of make sure that they do that. So we are expecting that data soon. The transportation layers are still being worked on. There are some discussions ongoing as to that particular data set and the potential for additional data, but that's all I can say about that at the moment, unfortunately, because there is still a little bit of negotiating back and forth. But we do expect that data soon. So they did ask for an extension, and that is coming up here pretty soon. It is around now that they should be finishing up that data set. And then kind of looking forward a little bit, we've already started talking with Dewberry about the initial planning for the 2026 flight. They've already been working internally to make sure they have the right amount of airplanes and the plans and all of that kind of stuff, and get all the FAA permits and all that kind of fun stuff. We do plan to have a kickoff meeting in early October. I will be inviting the group from the imagery acquisition working group to that meeting if they are so interested, so that we can kind of have a level set. Anyone else on the council is also welcome to join. Just let me know, and I will make sure that you get the invite for that meeting as well. And then additionally, I don't have it here. Dewberry is planning to come up for GIS Day in November, and they will be up in person and talking about imagery and what things you can do with it and things like that. So we will likely have some follow-up discussions in person with them while they are up here for the GIS Day stuff. So here is some of the data from the impervious cover. As you can see, it's very, very detailed. It covers a lot of different things. The top is kind of unsymbolized. Everything's just kind of white. And then the bottom is kind of everything's differentiated so that we can kind of see all of the various categories that exist. The data is all really, really good quality. It's interesting to see the difference between the imagery-derived buildings and the LiDAR-derived buildings. And Dewberry and Ecopia, but Dewberry in particular, are working on methodologies to use this imagery-derived building footprints to improve the positioning and quality of the LiDAR-derived building footprints, especially from the perspective of capturing and producing the update for 2026 from that imagery. So we definitely have that to look forward to. Does anybody have any questions on the imagery and elevation data? All right, so I will move on to 3D-HP. So 3D-HP is the replacement from USGS for the National Hydrography data set. This is essentially what's called an elevation-derived hydrography product. So it is essentially a 3D network, if you will, of every stream and river and water course in the state or anywhere. And so to that point, last year we did submit a joint DCA, which is, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's basically a cost sharing proposal to USGS for the HUCs or hydrologic units that you see listed there in blue. The participating states are all highlighted in green. So it was Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine that participated in a single DCA. We were unfortunately not awarded that, but that was just kind of due to all of the upheaval and uncertainty at the federal level, and as in particular with budgeting. However, when we were kind of rejected, the director of the 3D-HP program kind of called us and called me to kind of explicitly say, you guys need to try again. We want to do this project. There were logistical reasons outside of our control that meant we had to reject it, but we do want to do this. Please try again. So to that point, we kind of, pardon the pun, we rehydrated the effort and included New Hampshire and New York. So while they are not contributing any funds explicitly to the DCA this year, unlike last year, they have both agreed to allow HUCs to be developed on somebody else's dime in their areas. Because of that, the areas that we are proposing for the upcoming year are going to look a little bit different. So Connecticut is going to be submitting 2 DCAs this year instead of just the one joint one. So the map that you see at the top is the proposed areas that we are going to do for the joint DCA. I just now looking at this, I realized they left 2 HUCs off of it over in northern Mass in the northwest corner. Those are included in the project. But the nice thing is, because Mass and Rhode Island are both participated, they have both indicated that they will pay for their half of the HUCs that are in their state. So even though the USGS requires you to do an entire hydrologic unit, because we have decided to do all of it at once, Mass and Rhode Island have agreed to pay their fair share on it. So that's good. But also in the interest of spreading the computational and workload amongst multiple vendors, we are doing a second DCA with a different vendor to do all of the internal HUCs to the state. So why are we pushing for so much of the state at once? It kind of is related to Here, I'll do these a little bit out of order. So it is related to the passing of Public Act 2533 and the requirement to identify and create a database of each culvert in the state. Interestingly, one of the incidental products that happens when you create the 3DHP product is it detects the presence of what should be a culvert. So if we expedite the creation of the 3DHP data set, it can help us identify those areas where they have culverts that we may not know of. So we can give them the culverts that we know of, and then as they identify those areas that should have a culvert, they can identify where those might be. And then as we start kind of really filling in the gaps of where we might be missing data to fulfill PA 2533, we can then use that to kind of really target our efforts and be much more efficient about how we capture that data. So going back one slide, in this process, because we are kind of working with multiple states and multiple stakeholders and all of these things, we kind of took it upon ourselves to create a selection tool, a planning tool, project planning tool, where you can select multiple hucks or a single huck and kind of determine what the cost is going to be, kind of as like a general ballpark. That way, and then kind of split those costs by the state geography so that we know if this huck lands on a state border, how much is each state responsible for. We built this, I think, about a couple of weeks ago now, and this is a lot of Sarah's work here on this. And there were a couple of things that were particularly interesting about this. One, a lot of the financial and kind of monetary multiplication calculations are done exclusively in Arcade. The only reason we had to republish the Huck data set was because we had to calculate some of the area values in Python. Arcade could do it, but it takes like half an hour to load, and that's just not performant. So that's probably a thing that we will kind of make Esri aware of and encourage them to kind of improve so that we can kind of do this dynamically without having to duplicate data. The other interesting thing that this tool does is it also accounts for the requirement of not having to count open water in a huck. So like if you see the Narragansett Bay there, all of that is water does not count towards the cost. So we also calculated the area that is the land area of each huck. So, there's a huck right below that one that's basically the cliffs of Newport and literally just rest of open water that takes like $8 to $10 to kind of do through the 3DHP program. So that helps you really kind of narrow down what the true scope of work is, especially for a coastal community like ours. And I will say that all of the stakeholders in the consortium have found this application very, very useful. And the director of the 3DHP program also is very excited about the existence of this application and wants to kind of replicate it for nationwide use. Any questions on the 3DHP and water stuff? All right. Well,
I have one question, Alfredo, as I'm thinking. Given all these moving parts in this new application, when would we ever expect to see actual data should all the stars align?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So with the DCAs are due, the applications are due September 12th. So we send them over to USGS on September 12th. They have indicated that a lot of the budgeting upheaval has happened, and they're kind of much more in a normal-ish state on that front from a budgeting perspective for this project. Lots of caveats here. So they expect to be able to kind of announce decisions in kind of mid to late October, with executing the joint funding agreements by around the end of the year, early January at the latest kind of thing. So then, both of the vendors involved would then begin work, and it takes them, anywhere between 5-6 months to a year to kind of complete all of that work. The one challenge with that is USGS is down a lot of validators, especially on the 3D HP side. So because we do have multiple projects, it's kind of like, who gets to the finish line first with their project gets validated first and gets done first. So, there's even more moving pieces than I've indicated already, but I do expect to see this data within, next year and a half. At least start seeing preliminary data and then the finalized data, a year and a half to 2 out. And that's being somewhat conservative.
I said thanks, but I was muted, but thanks.
No worries. I saw. Any other questions or comments on that? All right. At this time, I'll open it up for public comment. So anyone that's not on the council can kind of speak and kind of ask questions or add commentary. All right. Hearing none, I guess we can move to end the meeting. That is all we have for today. Don't know that.
Thank you all.
Maybe we can do the rules and move in.
Motion to adjourn. John
Right.
Guskowski.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right.
Good job, guys.
No one's gonna object to leaving. So thank you all. Thank you so much. And have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.